Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Emily Hiles, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Geoffrey McGinley. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge the Honourable Whawala Harry Jeffrey Schuster, Minister for Police and Corrections, Samoa, Commissioner Awapau Longoitino Filippo, Samoan Police Commissioner, and their accompanying delegation. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Club Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is God by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved. And here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Leslie Reading Arndell. Leslie Arndell was born on the 19th of June 1889 in Sydney. Known as Les, he was one of 4 children born to Andrew Johnston Arndell, who worked for the Postmaster General, and his wife Amelia. Les received his education at Homebush Grammar School and later at Newington College. He then began working for the National Bank of Australia. He later left that job and took up land on the Richmond River with his brother. At the outbreak of the First World War in 1914, he was working as a dairy farmer. Leslie Arndell enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 19th of August 1915. He began his training at Liverpool, but soon developed an illness. As his health worsened, his parents requested that Leslie be discharged from the AIF. He left the ranks on the 29th of October and spent a long period recovering at the family home. Leslie re-enlisted the following year on the 19th of October 1916. He was allocated to the reinforcements of the light trench mortar batteries and began a short period of training in Australia. He embarked for active service from Sydney on the 9th of November 1916, sailing aboard the troop ship Benalla. Private Arndell arrived in England on the 9th of January 1917 and continued training alongside other new recruits. Before leaving for the front, he was transferred to the 19th Battalion. He travelled to France shortly thereafterwards and was taken on the strength of his new unit on the 5th of April 1917. His arrival on the front was marked by the German strategic withdrawal to the fortified Hindenburg Line. This retreat was eagerly followed by Allied units, which seized their opportunity to push the enemy back. In advancing on the Germans, these units were confronted by well-prepared rearguard defences and booby-trapped towns, producing a series of bloody clashes. Private Arndell's unit was caught in one of these attacks at the village of Lancourt in April 1917. Allied lines around Lancourt had been weakened and resources drawn away by the British offensive to the north at Arras, leaving the few remaining Allied units vulnerable to attack. Sensing an easy victory, 23 German battalions attacked Lancourt at dawn on the 15th of April 1917, aiming to hold the village for long enough to destroy resources and weaken Allied defences. Their overwhelming numbers enabled them to quickly sweep through the town and capture several batteries of the 1st Australian Division's artillery. Private Arndell's unit was one of just 4 Australian battalions faced with repulsing this overwhelming enemy force. The men eventually pushed the enemy back and recaptured the village after several hours of costly fighting. Less than 2 weeks later, Arndell's unit was again drawn into battle when the Allies mounted a second attack on the village of Bullecourt, which had been incorporated into the enemy's new front line. An attack on the village the month before, had produced absolute carnage. Under heavy machine gun and artillery fire, and without the expected support of tanks, Australian units had suffered over 3,000 casualties in one day. Under the cover of the Allied barrage, the second attack began at 3:45 a.m. on the 3rd of May. After members of the 5th Brigade moved off from their position, heading towards the enemy trenches, the enemy opened its own artillery barrage on the advancing troops, causing heavy casualties. After more than a week of fighting, the Allied units successfully took their objectives at a cost of a further 7,000 casualties. Among the missing was Private Leslie Arndell. He remained listed as missing in action for several months. During this time, his family suffered from increasing anxiety, unable to obtain any news of their son's fate. It was not until December 1917 that military authorities held a court of inquiry that determined that Arndell had been killed in action during his unit's attack on the 3rd of May 1917. One of his comrades, Private Matt Batman, described Arndell's final moments to the Red Cross. On the 3rd of May 1917, we went over to Bullecourt. I saw Arndell killed by a shell 3 or 4 yards away from me, just at the German wire. He was in front of me at the time. It was about 5 a.m, and the ground where he was killed was not held. Private Arndell's final resting place was never uncovered. Today, he is commemorated at the Australian National Memorial at Villiers-Brental, among more than 10,000 other Australians who have no known grave. he was 27 years old. Leslie Arndell's name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many of the stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Leslie Reading Arndell, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old, as where they're left grow old. Age will not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of our director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.